Hey everyone, welcome to Can't Afford to Record, the YouTube channel where we figure out the art of audio production together. And today I'm sitting down with Danny Young from Weird and Wired. I've actually known Danny for many years now because we're from the same hometown, and when I heard that he had started his own YouTube channel and business called Weird and Wired, I followed along and subscribed, and I've been following for years now, and he just makes the coolest stuff. If you haven't seen his channel, you're missing out. I'm talking about your telephone microphones, cassette radios that have been turned into guitar amplifiers, banjos made out of shovels, just all these cool things that Danny dreams up and then manages to make. I think the really cool thing about Weird and Wired is that they are all unique items. They are all handmade by Danny, and when you see a video about the documentation, the build of one of these musical instruments, one of these microphones, one of these amplifiers, that's the one that you get. I just think that's such a cool touch to add when you're buying something. That's awesome. Not only that, but I admire Danny Young so much because he's one of these musicians that just seems to just churn out album after album. Like, I don't know how many albums Danny has written, but it's a lot more than me. And the way he writes the songs and records the songs is so inspiring. I think it's the way that we all truly probably wish that we also wrote and recorded songs. And you'll see and hear what I mean when me and Danny get into that. You're gonna love this episode. Danny, thank you so much for speaking with me, and don't forget you can go and check out the audio version, the podcast version of this interview on Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. Enjoy. Here we are with Danny Young from Weird and Wired and a whole load of other projects. How are you doing, Danny?
I am great. It is good to see you. It's been a hot minute. It's been a little while.
It really has. We were just sort of explaining, or I was explaining to you, usually when I do Can't Afford to Record interviews, I have like a list of questions and a real deep history, the best I can get on the person I'm interviewing and all this sort of stuff. And it's not that I don't care about you, but it's just that I don't think I need to, because of course we've known each other for such a long time now. Maybe we'll even get into all of that sort of stuff as well. But I feel like I was trying to think today, what year would we have first met? I want to say 2005, but maybe I'm wrong.
Um, yeah, that adds up by my books.
Yeah,
In the Bedford music scene when I was getting out gigging.
that's right. Yeah, of course we're both from the same hometown. I don't live there anymore. You and I can't remember if you're in Bedford or not anymore.
Yeah, currently am. I've
Okay,
sort of been darting about, but I am back in back in the home
back
of.
in the. I love it. I love it. We at the time I was in a band called Scratch Plate, and you were in a band called Hex. We were trying to
Yeah.
take over the world.
Hex is still going though, not with
Hex.
me, but
Yeah.
it's still trying to take over the world.
Yeah, I think Scratch Plate gave up that dream a long time ago. A long, long time ago. I remember though, someone telling me about you. I was thinking about this as well this morning. Like, I guess I was 14, 15. Somebody being like, you have to see this guitarist, Danny Young. He's just a wizard on the guitar. And me being sort of an arrogant 15-year-old, I was a bit like, huh, well, I'll see what about that. Like, oh, you know, I want to be the best on guitar. And then I remember I actually met you and I was like, this guy's the nicest guy in the world.
Oh,
And
the
any kind of
secret.
hatred I had about you, I instantly dropped out.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
good times.
I remember. I don't know, getting into like the music scene and all that at the time, and then you were definitely one of the. There's people who own a guitar and play a guitar, and then there's guitarists, and there was just like in that little sphere around Bedford, you were definitely like one of the top tier guitarists. So I was like, this guy's gonna keep me on my toes, and you did,
Ah,
and you still do.
I don't know about that, but we also, went to the same music college together as well.
Yeah,
At the ICMP in London, and then yeah, we've kind of done this over the years, and now we're both doing a YouTube thing as well. So it's really exciting stuff. So a question that I will ask you though, that I ask everyone when I do these interviews is, do you remember a time you couldn't afford to record?
Yeah, probably like when I first started recording, where I had absolutely no knowledge and no gear, but I did have an older brother, Matt, who you personally know as well.
Hmm.
But the good thing about having an older sibling is that you can just sort of steal all their sort of their cool clothes and the cool bands they listen to, and then eventually the cool recording gear they've got. But I don't remember what it was that he had. Some like I don't even remember what this interface looked like, but I just knew he had something, and I was like, well, I've got nothing else. I'll just sneak into his room when he's at the house, and I'll just learn how to use this. But other than that, it's been a few times, I think, as well. Sort of if I've been staying somewhere away from kind of like my usual little setup, I guess, and not having access to anything, just using like the voice memo on the phone as well, I suppose. Being
Yeah.
one of those, but which is also, I'm not sure if you get this. Sometimes if you do record something in a hurry and you're like, okay, I'll just get it down, and then you try and recreate it, and it just never has that same magic, and then you're sort of stuck with like, I've got this real good, scratchy demo, and I can't polish it to anything else. And then I don't know if you just lose the idea from that, but
Yeah, I think a lot of my problem is remembering to actually record them in the first place. That's where because I always get this thing where I'm like, no, I'll remember it, and I never do. And someone brought up a good point that I've heard before is like, could you imagine how many more songs we'd have by the Beatles if they had iPhone memos?
yeah,
Like,
wow.
just thinking about, yeah, they were just to record an idea. It's like I have to go into the studio, have to get it done somehow, or maybe they might have had a tape recorder or so. I don't know, but I just wonder how many amazing songs would we have got if they all had iPhones.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think, the one thing I really admire about you, and again, we'll sort of go into a lot of this stuff, but you are in certainly outside looking in, you're you seem like your process is very throw and go, and I don't mean that in the way that you don't polish stuff or you don't really care about it, but I feel like you have this open-mindedness where I think you're the sort of person that if the iPhone demo had a vibe, you would somehow try and make that in the mix. You would import that and try and use it somehow.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something I've done as well. Same with going back to like little dictaphones as well. I've got like a mini cassette recorder I got from a charity shop for about £5, and it's one of the probably the best £5 I've ever spent in terms of any recording gear, because it's just something about I think there's sometimes when you hit record, hit the big red button, and then all your talent, all your kind of anything you could possibly do just flies out the window. But I do find that there's like different levels to that, whether I'm hitting like a big red digital button on my laptop, whether it's like on my phone, or if it's on the dictaphone. But I think it's just the first time you kind of listen back and it's like, okay, that's the thing. I try not to mess with it too much when whether it does start with something that's just being recorded on the phone. I think over time as well that's sort of become something that I've incorporated into it. I do like recording, especially acoustic guitar, recording it in the garden or outside, where you kind of get the sort of atmospheric, like the bird noises and things like that, rather than having to know record it separately. But
Yeah, I mean, so where did that process come from for you? Where did you realize that no, I'm going to embrace this because most of us are trying to get rid of the background noise and the birds and everything like that. So at what point did you say, I want it in there?
um I think it's only been in the last few years or so. Um, I remember it was with a band I was in called Speed Shot, and it was just a three-piece band. And I had it in my head like, oh, we're kind of like rock and roll, and then um, people were like, "You guys are punk. You're punk." And I was trying so hard to just be like a more polished kind of like a rock band or rock and roll thing, and it just seemed like just hitting against a wall. And then after a little while, I was like, oh, well, let's just try and be a punk band like people are saying. And then like people sort of paying more attention. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm not very I'm not very good at doing something super polished, but I can do something that's a little bit rough around the edges. And then I think that sort of feedback is carried on throughout everything in terms of recording. Like, I'm not great at doing like the most polished kind of like like the performance. I can capture a performance and just keeping it as raw as possible. I can do that to a better degree than if I was having to trigger drums and quantize everything and then still make it sound like a human and not like totally processed. Which is, I think, why I lean a bit towards things like the tape cassette recorders or the like dusty old like reel to reel home recording microphones, where it's just leaning into that, because I think that's just personally something that I feel that's what I do that better than if I try and do something which would be, God, if you're paying tens and thousands in a studio, I can't do that when I'm paying tens of pennies to pay the electric at home.
It's really, really, I mean, I have to say, dude, honestly, this is why I wanted to get you on Can't Afford to Record for so long, because I feel like you are the you are the poster child for Can't Afford to Record. And again, I mean that in a really good way, because I don't know, honestly, the perspective outside looking in, as someone that is constantly on Reddit or YouTube or whatever, trying to like, how do I like dynamically EQ this frequency, and how do I add this compressor to this, and like, what's the next plugin I should buy? I feel like you don't do that. I really feel like you just set up a mic or you put down your dictaphone and yeah, that was cool. Maybe I might move it a little bit. Okay, yeah, all right, we got it. And then you just get it into your DAW and you start making a song with it. I feel like, am I wrong or am I right?
That's pretty much spot on. I think
Okay.
it definitely came from years of that struggle of, I remember kind of going back to when I was using my brother's sort of little rig that he had set up. And I remember I'd sort of ask him, or I'd ask on forums and sort of say, I want to do this sound. And I can't think of anything specifically that came to mind, but just like a general question of like, how do I do this? And then all the answers would be sort of like, well, it depends, man. Like, everyone wants to do what they want to do, and it's all down to what you want. It's like, well, I know what I want, but I need someone to tell me how I get there. And I could never really get like much sort of guidance with that. And then I think all this kind of spent a lot of time, like years, with that frustration of, oh, maybe if I get this thing, or maybe if I try that. And I think it was maybe my mindset. I'm definitely work better like physically if something's in front of me, and then kind of using sort of like digital like faders and things like that, and like putting in loads of different plugins. And after a while, I kind of just, my eyes just can't, my brain can't take it anymore. Whereas if it's just something, get it right at the source first time, don't have to muck about with it too much, then it saves me a lot of anxiety and stress and screaming at a screen.
Yeah, I wish I could, or maybe I don't want to know how many hours I've spent researching plugins and and been on Reddit looking at, audio engineering subreddit, or I've thousands of hours that I could have been recording. I could have been doing what you're doing and just getting it right, but I just really admire that approach you have, and I think it's something that we all say, but none of us really act on as much as maybe you do, and people that have your process where it's like, oh yeah, from the source, but I still probably try and fix it in the mix more than I care to admit. And I think, yeah, I just the process of being okay with a glitchy wow and fluttery tape thing, because that's what you want, right? Rather than adding it on, or adding sort of a processed version of it later on in the DAW. You're gonna try and get it onto a cassette tape and then use that somehow.
Yeah, I think certainly for me, for my own peace of mind, it's the authenticity counts way more for me than it does to anyone else. And it's, I mean, a big thing I had would be if I was using, and I use Easy Drummer, or I Easy Drum was the first thing I got for like making my own little beats, and I still use it now occasionally. But there, for a long period of time, I was trying to use that in a way and try so hard to make it sound like this is a real drummer. And I maybe I could play it to someone and they'd be like, "Oh, who's drumming on this?" Or like not give it a second thought that it's not actually someone in a room playing. But then I would still know, and then I would have that in the back of my head, and I wouldn't be able to get past the song myself because I'd be like, oh, "I wish I had a real drummer on it." And I've definitely lost track of what my point was.
So is the point now that you embrace the fact that it's not a real drummer when you use those loops?
Yeah, like if it's something I kind of that led me into using like kind of 808 sort of plugins and stuff. So I do use plugins. I want it to sound like I just sing into a tape recorder. I'm like, that's the album. That's what we're putting on Spotify. But yeah, I think it's just using something for exactly what it is. I guess in terms of like another way that I would explain it to myself would be like if you were trying to play kind of like indie music on like a BC Rich. You can probably do it, but you might be better suited to doing it with like a Telecaster and sort of using what you've got and using it to its like absolute maximum.
Right, using the tools of the trade and
Yeah,
being intentional about what you're choosing to use for that job.
yeah, exactly. Rather than trying to bend something into maybe beyond its capabilities. But at the same time, that can be if sometimes I would start with an idea of like, oh, I'm going to try and achieve this, and then on the way to getting to that, I'll think, oh, actually, and then kind of you veer off course and you find something totally different to what you started out with, but maybe it's like that's a new idea or a new addition to the song. Maybe it's a new song altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
there's, I don't know, it's all horses for courses, I guess. Sometimes it's that way. Sometimes it's the stick to using things the way they should be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like for the longest time, or ever since I've known you, you've always been someone that wants to tinker with things. You want to make things. You want to have something that's a little different. I think we were in a band once, and you had a furry green covered Marshall cab that you, you made, and you had like a Les Paul copy, but with all these bottle caps, nailed into it. I guess you've never been afraid to have something that perhaps isn't a £3,000 Les Paul. You're quite happy to have some, an instrument that might be £300 or maybe even less, but you really embrace it. And someone like me, again, going back to in my teenage years, I would have been like, oh, Westfield Les Paul, gross, or something like that. I was like, no, I want my real Gibson. But they all play the same notes, they all play the same chords. Um, and of course, I feel like that's progressed into what Weird and Wired is all about as well. But can you maybe explain a little bit about your sort of mindset with instruments and maybe there's some stuff there that I said might that resonate with you?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, putting it in terms of recording, having something which is a little bit, if it is being tinkered with, whether it's like using the telephone microphone, it's going to give you a sound which not everyone's got that exact same thing that you've got. Or even if it's using like I love like the 90s Yamaha keyboards that like everyone would get for Christmas, and then they've been in people's lofts for the last 20, 30 years. But using those on a recording because it's like a completely different sound to having a nice, clean, nice sounding keyboard part. You can have a dirty, horrible, slightly out of tune keyboard part. And I think with using gear like that as well, I mean, I do get a lot of things like that from like charity shops or like thrift stores, antique stores. And I find if you sort of paying next to nothing in terms of what this gear or any gear can cost, I find I get way more ideas out of something which has cost me tens of pounds rather than like hundreds. And I'm not sure why that is. I mean, I used to do like I'm doing function gigs around holiday parks, and I was like, well, I don't want to be lugging my big pedal board that I'm taking to like the other gig. So I came across a Digitech. I can't even think of what it was, but it's just like two like stomp box
Is it
thing, a
like
charity.
the RP100 or the RP50 or something like that?
One of those, yeah.
Yeah,
Like like 15 bucks for this thing, and I was just like, be a throwaway. I'll just have like two channels on it that I'll be able to use, and then I've written songs based on just the delay that had, and it's got way more use beyond what I thought I would get from it. I'm not sure whether it's just there's something, if you spent all this money, there's such an expectation that it's going to give you all these songs and all this sort of people are going to come up and be like, that's a sweet guitar you got. And then if you kind of roll up to a gig with like a biscuit tin banjo, people are going to be like, that's interesting.
Well, it's like this conversation piece, and I think you're right. Do you find it a bit of a challenge as well? Is it there a little bit like, I've seen this effects pedal, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to use this. It's like there's a certain thing of how much can I get out of it, knowing that it's pretty cheap. Whereas, like, maybe I'm just rehashing what you said just now, but rather than spending a lot of money on something, I feel like you have to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that kind of goes back to sort of using something to its like maximum, getting all the potential out of it that you can. Um, I think it definitely seems like a challenge to yourself where if you've spent like something that would cost you like a coffee, and it's like, right, how much can I get out of this in any sense? I find it just seems to be a bit more kind of gets my sort of creative spark a bit more than I guess I can sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed if like someone's got like a vintage synth. I almost feel like a bit scared to touch it, and I kind of think, like, oh my gosh. Well, especially I think there's so much weight behind certain things where if it is like a Les Paul, for example, and you're thinking like all the amazing players that have played Les Paul and all the amazing songs, and there's probably a part of me which is like, what are you going to do that's new with that? Whereas if I get a tissue box and a couple of rubber bands, then that's something that Angus Young hasn't dared to do yet. So
yeah, there you go. You're ahead of the curve. Or maybe a 5-year-old Angus Young might have got a tissue box and rubber bands, but
maybe
that's not documented as far as we know.
Yeah.
No, I totally appreciate it, and it's been a recent experience for me as well, because I am, a big fan of thrift stores, and I've had a lot of success in thrift stores. Although Canada, I have to say, so I found one recently that's very good, but most of them are like, we have these places called value villages, right? And it's reused stuff, but it's like $7 for a wine glass, and you're like, I know it's been owned before, but I can buy a wine glass cheaper than that. So they're not always great, but this one recently, and I actually hit you up about it the other day because I've got this Casio tone keyboard in the back there, and it was $1 because it had a piece of tape on it that says "does not work." Unfortunately, maybe for the thrift store, it just turns out they had the wrong. It had like a European power cable on it or something like that. And I plugged in the right one and it fired up just great, but it has a wood veneer on it. It's from like 1983. It has a wood veneer on it, and it has all these really cool plastic buttons. And I was like, for $1, this is just good. This is just good decoration more than anything else. And it does work. And I wish I could put the time aside, but I really hope there's a morning or an afternoon sometime that comes up where I can just plug it in and get a really awful jazz organ sound and see what song I can make out of it.
Absolutely. As I say, spending next to nothing, $1, how many songs can you get for that dollar?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's we'll see. Watch this space, I guess. Tell me a little bit about how Weird and Wired came to fruition, because I will absolutely say it, and I would say this. I would say this regardless if I was interviewing you right now, but Weird and Wired is my favorite YouTube channel I've ever subscribed to. It's the most inspiring channel, and I just love what you're doing, and you're doing a really good job of it. Like, you're not, I mean, you sell this stuff. You're not just sort of making it and it hangs around. You're selling it on Reverb, and people, you've got return customers coming back to buy more weird and wonderful things. But tell me what made, what started Weird and Wired for you? Because if you ask me, and knowing, having known you for a long time now, it seems like the dream job for you.
It is one of those things where I'm not quite sure how it's got to the point that it has, and I feel so fortunate and thankful and grateful to like anyone who's paid any attention. I mean, the from what I remember, the very first thing I made, which was then sold as, I think it might have even been before Weird and Wired even came up as a name, I was helping someone move out, and they had like a bunch of stuff. They were like, I don't really care about this. And there was this little Bluetooth speaker. And I think I just watched a video about how you can rewire a speaker into a microphone. And so I thought, oh, I'll grab that because maybe I can tinker with that. I'd done some kind of guitar repairs in the past, so I knew how to use a soldering iron, had like a very basic knowledge of wiring. And so I kept hold of this little speaker, put a jack to it, and turned it into a microphone. And I was thinking, oh, this is cool, but it'd be cool to use it kind of using a really unconventional sort of body for it. And so then I went to a local charity shop and I was sort of just looking at the bric-a-brac section, seeing if there was anything that would be about the right dimension of this speaker. And there was this little travel hairdryer. So I was like, that's amazing. Imagine just singing into a hairdryer. And then it was the exact same dimension. So I was like, perfect.
It's meant to be.
Yeah. And then it just all fit together so well. I was just like, wow, great. And then I think I put it onto like a Facebook buy and sell page with no expectation. And then someone got in touch and said they were in an all-female punk band and it going to fit their aesthetic perfectly. I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, and so they bought that as the first thing. And then I think following that, I think they might have said like, oh, where can I like kind of keep up to date with what you're doing? And so I thought like, oh, I better like get a name and set up a page. And then I definitely I can tell you where Weird and Wired came from as well, the name. On The Simpsons, there's this part where Homer's sitting on the sofa and then Lisa's walking through with Wired magazine. And he's like, oh, the new issue of Weird magazine's here. And there's, oh, wait, this isn't Weird magazine. There's no such thing as Weird magazine. I don't know why. Out of all the things on The Simpsons, I think everyone's got those little random jokes, which is only funny to them. And then I thought, well, it's the things I'm making are strange and they're electric, so Weird and Wired. And I thought that's for sure going to be taken by someone, and it wasn't. And so I was like, I'll use that quick then.
Yeah.
And then it's just sort of built up from there, just making things. And even now, I've made some of the stuff I've sold. I'll get to the end of the project, I'll finish making it, and I'll look back at it, and I'll be like, this is goofy and outrageous, and I love it. And maybe there's one other person in the world who loves it as much as I do. And I mean, I think the most sort of viewed thing that I sold was the Micro Machines guitar. Micro Machine body. I went to Derek Wells, I believe.
Yeah, went to a famous person.
Yeah, and it's amazing that he was the nicest guy as well. And it's just things like that where I'm always curious to know sort of where these things end up and how they get used. And I rarely do, to be honest. I always kind of say to people, I love to see it getting used. But I'm sure everyone knows what it's like when you buy something and you're like, oh, this is great, I'll leave a review tomorrow. And then you never get back to doing it and things like that. So I get how it is, but seeing how things do get used, it makes my day. It's so funny. It's so bizarre as well, knowing this thing's kind of like gone either down the road or halfway across the world, and being put to use in ways that I couldn't even dream of.
And it seems like, you know, you've found such a niche, because I mean everyone has watched how to make a, you know, a telephone microphone type video. A lot of people that are half interested have made one. I've made one, absolutely love it. But you took it a step further, and yeah, you did these macro machine. I'm going to turn this toy into a guitar, or I'm going to turn this, this puzzle board into a guitar. Or you do these things, but it seems like you capture the heart of so many people, especially like websites like Reverb, who have, you know, reposted your stuff, haven't they? And they've said, hey, like, check out what's been listed this week, and there it is, a Weird and Wired, you know, invention.
Yeah, I try not to overthink anything. I think that can sometimes be like the difficult part, where sometimes if it's been a little while, I've kind of caught up with everything that I've had. Sometimes I'll just buy something that I see sort of online or in like a thrift store, charity shop, and I think I'll be able to do something of that one day. But then if I force the idea, I normally end up falling out of love with it. I always find it's the things that no second guess in it, just sort of get it, do it. The idea is already fully formed, and it's not till after the fact I look back and I sort of think like, where did all this come from? Like I don't really remember the thought process of what exactly inspired me to think I'm going to make a Scrabble board guitar.
Right.
I um just I think there's just a part of me. I think maybe like, I don't know, cartoons where you see maybe somebody be doing like a solo on a tennis racket or something like that, and then that's always sort of stuck to me, using things that shouldn't be instruments, but then turn them into a usable instrument.
Yeah. Is there Has there ever been, because you know you're making it sound, and I don't know why I never sort of connected this before, but you're making it sound a little bit like when you write a song or write an EP or an album, you can overthink it and then be like, I hate this song, this is the worst. Have you ever made something and been like, this is the worst thing I've ever made, no one's gonna buy this, and then, you know, a week later it's being shipped off to Germany or something like that?
I'm sure it's happened. There's definitely projects where I just, the longer it takes, the less sort of thrilled I feel about it. But it's that thing, like, no one, unless you're documenting it, no one's going to see the process. Same as sort of if you're writing a song, you can play someone a song and they'll say, that's good, well, that's great, that's amazing, or whatever their response is. But they don't know that you've spent countless hours working on this song, getting so frustrated, trying to get every part of it right. It's exactly the same with like building things as well. And I find with songs I write, the songs I like the most are the songs where you sit down, it takes you a minute and a half to write a 3-minute song, because it just comes to you that naturally, that quick. The words come at the same time as the music.
Yeah,
And
they're the best.
yeah, it's
It,
exactly the same. I find that with everything, to be honest.
it
It's
happened
trying.
with me the other day. I was like, I really love a band right now called The War on Drugs. Do you listen to War on Drugs?
Yeah, yeah, I'm familiar.
Really, really great band. And I was like, oh, I just want to write something so emotionally attached to, you know, really meaningful lyrics. And I tried so hard, like gushed all my reverb up and all this sort of stuff. And I sat there for an hour and I was like, nothing is happening. And then, you know, I'm I am I'm a power pop guy. I'm a pop rock guy. So I just turned off the reverb and two chords down, 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 and like within 5 minutes, I had like a brand new song that I'm really proud of. Made a quick scratch demo of it, and we're tracking it now. And it's those sort of things where it's, you know, I'm kind of thankful that I tried to write a war and drug song, because it made me realize I can't. And then actually, I just went back to something that I feel like I am a lot better at. And so maybe that happens as well when you're building stuff. Has there ever been something that you've built and you're like, I really hope no one buys this because I actually want to keep it?
Yeah. Um,
Was
I think that
the macro machines was one? Was that really one?
that was I that kind of really showed to me how much people do relate to this stuff, because it is, every time I list something, I did have some really negative. I've had on a couple of occasions had some very negative sort of feedback, not from people who have bought something, but people who have sort of seen the things I've listed and just they do not understand it. And I totally get that it's not for everyone. Um, but then
Does that
it's
fuel you a little bit more when you see someone that's like, "This is so stupid," and you're like, "Okay, well, I'm just gonna make 10 more of them." You know?
yeah. I mean, I never sort of respond in a negative way to people. Like everyone's entitled to think what they want to think. It does. I do read every single comment that I get, and I reply to them all as well. Um, it's Instagram. Also, I think it was when Reverb shared the Micro Machines one, and that was, it was not totally divided, but it's quite divided. Where there'd be some people who were sort of saying like, "What is this abomination?" Which I kind of agree with at the same time. But then it'd be interesting seeing other people I don't know, and they'd sort of be saying like, "Hey, it's just as fun," and all kind of sort of saying what they think of it as well, and kind of like, I guess, like sticking up for me having made it and having the audacity to list it online. But it's
Yeah.
yeah, kind of going back to anything that I've not wanted to sell. A lot of the things I'll finish the project and I'll be like, oh, I love this, and then I'm thinking, oh, I kind of want to keep this, and then I'll start the next project, and then I'm like, okay, that one can go because I love this one now. It's like the next thing, always chasing the next thing.
And that's what it's about, isn't it? You know, I think that's why I got so into. Well, I think no, I don't want to say. I don't want to say I fell out of love of of gigging and the live work, but I I feel I can say I have just as much enjoyment, if not more, mixing songs and producing songs for people now, because it's we finish it and then that's you now. I get to I get to go and work on something else now. There is a certain thing of being able to just be so excited for the next project, or know that something else is coming up, or you know, when you finish this one, which you've absolutely loved doing, you get to start a completely different genre and you're going to love doing that. And there's a sense of just that everything stays fresh, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's kind of made me remember. I've had that sort of thought before, where all the years that I'd be sort of slaving away, sort of playing in a band, thinking like, oh, I really want to, we're gonna break through and we're gonna be massive stars or whatever, or not that you actually thought you're entitled to that, but you kind of really
There's a
like, oh,
hope. Yeah.
this is gonna be a thing, and then it just, those bands always break up, and then you sort of left and you start again. But it's sort of just kind of making the projects for Weird and Wide and how organically all everything is built, and it's so much more enjoyable. And I mean, there's no, it doesn't feel like there's any pressure. I don't really, I guess obviously put some amount of pressure to kind of keep up and keep doing things, but I think at the same time that's more kind of relieving the pressure of, if I'm not doing this stuff, I'm probably going to explode because I need to be doing something creative. Same with like music, the same reason that we all keep writing songs after, no one just sort of sits down to write one song. You kind of do that, and then you write the next one, the album, and the whole back catalogue. And it's something that I'd be doing either way, regardless. And
Hmm.
it's just, it's such a overwhelming to know that other people sort of dig it as well, and other people don't dig it. That's good to have both ends of it.
And you've kind of picked a great avenue and direction, because you know, touring, I mean, there are exceptions, right? You know, the Rolling Stones, and you know, the people that just seem to just keep living and keep touring. You know, all of these guys. Buddy went and saw Slipknot the other day, and he said that, you know, they've been playing. They said that, oh, this is our 27th year touring professionally. It's like these guys, like Can this clown keep jumping off this drum riser at the age of 55? How much longer can you keep doing this? But there is a limit, isn't there? You know, there is going to be a limit with it. But I kind of feel like Weird and Wired is like you could be 75 and still making telephone microphones.
Yeah, that's the plan now. With my see how steady my hands stay over time, I guess.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
I've always thought that as well. Like I was saying, when I was doing the sort of doing the like the function gigs in the past, and there's always like some level, like you say, there's like an uncertainty about how long is this going to last. Especially the last couple of years, I think we all know sort of how we've all experienced that to some degree. But then that was a sort of the time where Weird and Wired, I was able to focus on that, and that sort of highlighted that this is something that I can just do by myself. I can set up a little space. I don't need to have like a practice room or a studio or all this other stuff. I just need somewhere I can use a few hand tools and plug in a soldering iron, and now I'm away. I can do so. It definitely, in that sense, maybe that's why it doesn't feel like there's so much pressure to have to do all this stuff. Got to do it all right now. Got to do all these gigs and do all these recordings, and it's just something which is it's far more peaceful.
Yeah. Um, we always sort of end up getting into talking about imposter syndrome a little bit on these interviews of like, you know, I mixed this song and like, you know, despite people telling you that this sounds great, you're always like, no, it doesn't. This is this is the worst thing I've ever made or ever mixed. And like, do you ever get that a little bit when you make something? Is there ever a little bit of anxiety that lingers or imposter syndrome that lingers when you've made something, someone's bought it, and then you have to send it off to them? Is there ever a part of you that thinks, oh man, I really hope they like it? Or, you know, is there any sort of lingering stuff around that?
I always think of it in terms of if I was the customer, which is part of the reason. I mean, a lot of the YouTube videos, I started doing that because I would be looking on Reverb myself at like guitars or whatever it was, and I'll be looking through the photos, and then I'd see, oh, like check out the YouTube demo, and it might just be like a generic demo that the brand had made, and I sort of thought like, well, if I saw the video of the exact thing I was buying, I'd be a few more kind of steps closer to buying it. Cause I'd be like, that's the exact thing. That's it. And you sort of see it up close. That's what I started doing with the things that I was sort of making or anything that I've sold.
What a great idea. Because then you get content and you sort of have this, you know, Reverb listing that really reassures and shows how much love has gone into making that item and making a yeah, it's like they get to see the journey of it and then get
Yeah,
to own it.
it's I just love documenting some of the guitars I come across as well, where I think my taste is definitely sort of like the K guitars, like the 60s and 70s. And
The lawsuit stuff, yeah.
yeah, there's one of the bass, I think it was the last bass that I'd seen was a Hondo Alien, and it was so wacky. It was so fun just to sort of learn about these things, and then kind of put the information together and sort of show how you can use these. And even if it's not for someone who wants to buy it, even if it's just someone who's maybe curious about these instruments, and then I mean a lot of the K stuff as well. It's not necessarily branded well on the guitars themselves, so it can be hard to identify. Like some of them don't even have like a brand name on, let alone a serial number. So I think it's just for my own curiosity. I think if I do find out any information, I do like to be able to share it with people, because there might be another person similar sort of taste who's like, what's this one guitar called? And they might come across one of my videos or like an Instagram post, and they'll be like, oh, it's called this random sequence of letters and numbers. But you know
That's awesome.
how geeky us guitarists can get.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's yeah, horrifically geeky as much as we don't want to admit it. Um one of your, you know, as of the time of recording this interview, one of the latest videos you've done is making a cassette a radio cassette amplifier, which I am gonna make. Okay, I am so inspired to make one of these. I don't know if I'll get it in shell pink like you've managed to do, but I see them all the time, and now I'm like, I'm definitely gonna make one of these. Um, but what would be some advice you'd give to someone that kind of wants to start doing what you're doing? Because you're really good. You're not a gatekeeper. You actually do share, especially on this last one. You actually share how to make this, and or how can I do this, and you although you make them and sell them, I feel like you also want to inspire people to do the same sort of things. So for somebody that's just bought their first soldering iron and wants to make something weird and wired, what would you advise they do?
Um, yeah, I think I definitely am all about inspiring people, and there shouldn't be any secrets being held. But I think I started off uh, doing like a lot of piezo pickup sort of wirings, um, which is just two wires. You can do it straight to a guitar jack, and then you can use that on near enough anything because it's a close contact microphone. You can use it as a pickup on like a biscuit tin, and you got an electric drum in an instant. And then from that, you can go to add in a volume potentiometer, and then if you want to use it as an instrument, with something as a, if you're going to use it on like a biscuit tin bass, then you could add a tone potentiometer as well. I think it's just starting with something relatively simple. When you're happy with that, and you kind of push yourself, I think everyone sort of knows their own sort of rate and kind of what they're capable of. Um, yeah, I think definitely. And I'm not going to say it's all going to be super easy. There's even stuff now which I've done more times than I can count, and then I just sometimes you have an off day, or your brain just goes blank. It's all troubleshooting. It always keeps yourself on your toes. But yeah, just if you're even slightly intrigued, I think that the major cost is going to be a soldering iron, but you can pick them up from countless places for not a great deal of money.
Yeah, yeah. So it's I think the first thing I made that's sort of along the lines of what you do is a telephone microphone, and I just wanted one. I just thought they looked so cool, and definitely was all inspired by you and your channel. And I was like, I'm gonna try and do something like that, and I use it. I definitely use it. It's and again, it comes back to that intention and being like, should I? I could just load up a telephone preset on this EQ, or I could record it with a telephone microphone and see what have that more authentic sound. So yeah, it's just so cool, and I just hope you don't stop. I just want you to keep doing what you're doing, folks. If you are watching this and you haven't gone and checked out Weird and Wide, you have to, because one of the things I really love about watching your videos is just I can just see in you how much you love what you're doing. Like there's times when you're talking about it and you're looking at the item and you can't help but just laugh. You laugh out loud because you just know maybe it's just so ridiculous or so goofy that you just made, and yet here it is. It's now this other thing, and you can just sort of see how much, yeah, just how much you put into it. You can really see how much you enjoy making this stuff. So are you able to just let us know where we can find out more information, where we can get a hold of you, where we can go and subscribe and follow? Not that it
Yeah.
won't all be also in the description below, but let's say it out loud.
So you've got Instagram is at Weird and Wired Creations. Same with Facebook, and YouTube, I believe, is just Weird and Wired.
Okay, and then the Reverb page?
Reverb page as well is just Weird and Wired, I do believe.
Okay.
Possibly with creations at the end.
We'll find out.
To be sure.
Okay. Well, Danny, it's been great catching up with you. It's been great hearing about your recording process, and you just have this real authentic approach, and I think that's whether you're songwriting or whether you're recording or whether you're making something, you really stick to your guns, and you don't try and be anything that you're not, and you just really embrace what's around you and the vibe that you're trying to give. And yeah, it's very, very admirable and just really cool stuff, man. Keep doing it.
Hey, thank you, man. It means the world to hear it from anyone, but especially you.
Ah, come on. Well, listen, we need to do a part two, as I say in most interviews, but let's do a part two at some point and talk about the latest, Victorian desk guitar you've made or something like that. Is there any part of you that, dreams it up and then writes it down really quickly, or is it literally visual inspiration that you see something?
More often than not, it's like a visual. I'll sort of see it and then I'll be on it. But I do have notebooks, and I never look back through them until I finish them. I finished one the other day. It was just in the middle of this page. All I wrote was it was about 3 lines, which summed up gaffer tape guitar, no screws, nothing but gaffer tape. Which the idea of trying to hold something together, even gaffer tape, just to show how is gaffer tape strong enough to hold an entire guitar together? Which I then also thought is maybe not the best use of gaffer tape, and you can get a sticky guitar at the end of it, so maybe it's a bit wasteful. But there's maybe there's a reason I don't write all of them down, because it's something like that which maybe shouldn't see the light of day.
But wasn't there a Noodles from the Offspring gaffer tape guitar once?
Yeah,
I wonder if you could try and, because that obviously would have been, there would have been some screws, or that's coming from a factory. But I wonder if you could do a comparison, if you could somehow source one of those original duct tape guitars and then try and make something similar. I don't know.
We'll see. Or maybe the body is just a solid wedge of duct tape, just reams and reams. Here we go. We're spitballing ideas right now.
It's perfect. It's perfect. All right, dude. Well, listen, great catching up with you as always. Congratulations with the channel. It deserves tens of thousands more subscribers, because it is truly an inspirational place. Whenever I want to know how to make a banjo out of a shovel, or whenever I want to see a Scrabble board made into an instrument, there's only one place I go, which is Weird and Wired, and it's just really, really great. So please, folks, go and check out Danny's stuff. Check out his music as well, because I'm a big, big fan of Danny Young's music, and he's big on Bandcamp and all that kind of stuff. All that information in the description below. And Danny, we'll speak real soon.
Definitely, man.
See ya.